Library girls asked me to come introduce my friend Jeffrey Stepakoff to you. They only gave me 3 minutes, and they don't know we've changed the format. I'm speaking. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm going to have to read from this because Jeffrey has such a beautiful resume. I accidentally back there said he has such a great obit.
You're rushing me.
I was like, wow, that was a bad Freudian slip. That I'm going to have to actually read a lot of this straight from here. But Jeffrey's not only a great friend, but he is a true storyteller in all the ways that we use the word storyteller. Yes, he's a writer, and a brilliant writer, and a trained writer. But in all the ways that we use the word storyteller, that's Jeffrey. All of us as authors, every single one of us here, grapple with our way of writing and telling our stories, whether they're fiction or nonfiction. It's usually messy, the way we decide to tell our stories. We find our way with dead ends and misdirections, but Jeffrey has found all the ways to tell a story. Even a conversation with Jeffrey is a story. He earned his degree in journalism from UNC and then went to Carnegie Mellon to earn a Master of Fine Arts in playwriting, then on to Hollywood to write for film and television. Hoover has not given me enough time to list all the shows and movies he's worked on, so I'm going to cut it short and give you some examples. Jeffrey has written by or story by credits on 36 television episodes. He's written for 14 different series and has worked on 7 primetime staffs, producing hundreds of hours of internationally recognized television, including The Wonder Years. God, I loved The Wonder Years. Who didn't love The Wonder Years? Simon and Simon, and then he moved on to my teenager's generation with Dawson's Creek. I remember my daughter watching Dawson's Creek, just, someday I'll fall in love. And get that kiss, that big kiss at Dawson's Creek, the one that heard round the world, where he was co-executive producer. He's also created and developed pilots for many of the major studios and networks, including 20th Century, Paramount, MTM, Fox, and ABC. And he has developed and written major motion pictures, including Disney's Tarzan and Brother Bear. Then a few years ago, Jeffrey returned to Atlanta with his wife and 3 young children and began writing fiction. And of course, it was immediately successful. He seems to touch things and they turn into gold. Fireworks Over Toccoa was first published by St. Martin's in 2010. It is his debut novel, and it was a Southern Independent Booksellers Alliance Okra pick and an ABA Indie Next Notable pick. His new novel, The Orchard, is also a SIBA pick, which is the Southeastern Independent Bookseller Association. It was released in North America in 2011. Both of his books are in 11 different languages, which I find fascinating. So Jeffrey has gone from journalist to playwriting to TV writing to motion picture to novels. This is a man who loves words and what he can make them become. But most notable for me is his love story he wrote and is writing in his real life with his wife Elizabeth and their 3 children. 8 years after meeting his wife, they had their first date. And, right? I got that right? And after she finished telling him how miserable they were both living in LA and trying to make the scene and make things work in LA. And at their first date, she complained about how miserable her mattress was. Oh. So for his second and unannounced date, he strapped a queen-size mattress to the top of his Jeep Wrangler and took it to her. So you can see that Jeffrey's view of life and love is clouded by, or maybe a better word is gilded by, his love of story. So welcome, Jeffrey Stepakoff.
What else do I have to say now? Patty, thank you so much. Amazing writer, great human being, fabulous friend. Thank you. Thank you all for having me here today. I really, really appreciate it. Gosh, I'm so flattered to be here and share the stage with such amazing people. And thank you to Amanda for loaning me your watch. I will keep this to about 20 minutes. I'm going to try to expand on my writing journey that Patty has given you a little bit of a taste of. Grew up in Atlanta, really got the South in my blood. I really responded to a lot of what Karen was talking about, how the South really got into me when I was growing up. Went to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and studied journalism. I really started writing for the theater there. And I guess I thought I was going to graduate early with a degree in playwriting, but I don't know, I wasn't quite ready to graduate. I was still enjoying college. But more to the point, I was told that it was not reasonable to graduate with a degree in theater. So like I said, I got a degree in journalism, advertising sequence, and somehow I convinced Ogilvy and Mather Advertising in Atlanta that they should hire me to represent Hardee's, Union Carbide, Equifax, which really seemed fun for about 2 seconds until I realized that I was going to be, wearing a sport jacket and nice clothes and even a tie to work every day, and moreover, writing copy for Union Carbide and Equifax and Hardee's, and not writing for the stage, which is what I really wanted to do. So after about a year, I started furtively applying to graduate schools where I could study playwriting or perhaps screenwriting, and got into a few, one in California, one in New York, and ultimately Carnegie Mellon, which is where I went to school up in Pittsburgh, and got an MFA in playwriting, and broke my father's heart because Ogilvy and Mather wanted to send me, they were offering to send me to Georgia State University to get my MBA in marketing. Now, my father could hardly believe that I had actually, gotten a job in advertising, which was a reasonable career. Now he could hardly believe that they were going to send me to graduate school to get an MBA degree. And what did I do? I blew off the whole thing. What are you going to do? Write for a living? The guy said to me. Well, yeah. Why not? Now, I'd like to think that at 21, 22 years old, I really did think, yeah, I'm going to write for a living. What I really thought was that I was 21, 22 years old, and I just didn't want to be working in advertising. I wanted to go back to college, so I did. I really, I guess you'd say, learned my chops at Carnegie Mellon. Learned how to write for the stage, learned how to work with actors, learned how to hole up until 3 o'clock in the morning and just write. And I mean, that for me was a real gift, having that time to write, having that time to focus on dramatic storytelling, if you will. And in some ways, I found I'm not going to say my voice, but my sensibility as a writer in the theater program there. I was getting ready to graduate in the spring of 1988 when I met a guy named John Wells, who was a former student at Carnegie Mellon. And he was doing a seminar at Carnegie, and he said, "Stepakoff, why are you going to go to New York and write for the Black Box Theater?" Which is what I guess I was planning to do. Black Box Theater, if you don't know, is it's a small stage, maybe half the size of this room, where people do experimental plays, that sort of thing. And I figured, well, I'm, again, 22, 23 years old, and don't really have much of a plan, and I figured, why not? He said, "Why don't you come to California? It's an incredible time for television. They're looking for people that can write for the stage out there." Frankly, they were looking for people that just understood how to use script writing software. If you could do that, you could probably get a job in television. And I started looking at TV, and I figured, yeah, okay, I'll give this a shot. Do you all know who John Wells is? He created ER, Third Watch, ultimately West Wing with Aaron Sorkin. So, at the time, it didn't mean too much to me. He was just somebody who knew people. So I figured, okay, I'll give this a shot. I wrote a spec script for Molly Dodd, which was a show on the air at the time. And I really started studying television. I won't go into too much detail at this time, but in short, it was an incredible time for TV. A lot of people think the 50s was the golden age of television. I like to think that the late 80s, up until about 1996, when there were changes in regulatory policy in the country, were really the golden age of TV. If you remember what was on, we had shows like The Wonder Years and Molly Dodd and China Beach, and Fox had just started, and Northern Exposure and Seinfeld. It was really an incredible time. Married with Children had just come on the year before. So I really embraced what was going on with TV at that time. Packed up my car, which took, 2.5 hours to put my life's belongings in this little vehicle that I had, and headed west. But before I went west, I headed back to Atlanta to do some laundry and see friends. And literally, the night before I left, I went to the Buckhead Steamhouse Lounge, And if you all know Atlanta, people seem to know this place as having, it had a kind of an upper deck. It had a big tree that went up through the middle of it. And sitting next to me at the Buckhead Steamhouse Lounge that night before I left for Los Angeles was this beautiful girl, just gorgeous girl with big, huge black hair and huge shoulder pads because it was 1988. And I thought about her the entire trip that I was making out west. I will get back to this girl momentarily. But that is when I met her. Arrived in LA in May of 1988, right in the middle of the writer's strike of 1988, which was quite, it was an incredible time to start a career out there when there really was no business. It was in many ways fortuitous to be out there because agents could take meetings with me. John Wells got my material around, and I had some very exciting meetings with people that probably would have been too busy to take meetings with me if there actually was a business. But it was also a very tumultuous time for the industry because I took an internship at Universal in motion picture marketing, and there were writers outside the building who were striking, carrying signs, talking about what they wanted and what their demands were. And again, I won't go into all the details now, but it really looked like the business was on the edge, and it was. I had a job making $286 a week. My father was truly hoping that I would be so, poor and starving and really just not be able to make it out there that I would give up and come back to Atlanta, I guess, and go get the MBA degree. But I loved being out there. I was living in a converted garage for this crazy woman in Brentwood. I basically was her slave. She had me, I think I was paying her $100 a week to sleep on this mattress in the garage, and she had me mowing her lawn and moving water bottles around. And I'm not kidding, it was a mattress on a garage floor. But I was in LA and I was surviving. My job in motion picture marketing, if you've ever been to a mall and been stopped by people who say, would you like to come and see a movie screening? If you ever go to the screening, you'll be given questionnaires afterwards. Well, I was the schmuck who stayed up all night long and counted the responses on the questionnaires. How many people liked the shark in Jaws 4? How many people liked Michael Caine? How many people want to see the ending change? That kind of thing. But I was in LA and I was surviving. My boss in motion picture marketing had a former college friend, a fraternity friend, who at that time was the head of current television at Universal. And my boss in motion picture marketing set up a meeting over there, got my material over there, my Molly Dodge spec, and by that time I'd written a Gary Shandling spec. A spec is a speculative script, if you don't know, an example script, something that you might write for an existing television show. And this guy, the vice president of current television, said, Jeff, we love your material. We would love to have you write for us. And I said, yeah, but there's a strike going on right now. And he says, yes, but we want to put an end to that. And we're determined to keep Charles in Charge, which was a television show that was on during that time. We won't talk about the quality of that show, but it was a show that Universal was determined to keep on the air. We are going to keep Charles in Charge on the air, he said to me, and we're gonna go find writers that aren't in the union yet. And we're offering $10,000. I think he said $10,000 cash. It may have been a cashier's check, but when I was at school in Pittsburgh, I was walking from one restaurant where lunch was $2.50 to another restaurant where lunch was $2.35 because that 15 cents really meant something to me. So to be offered 10 grand to write a script of a television show, which is really what I wanted to do, I mean, it was a dream come true. So naturally I called my father because I assumed the man was going to tell me, take the money, write the script. He said, well, you know what? Maybe you actually do have something here. Maybe if they want to hire you now, they'll want to hire you when this strike is over. So I don't think you should take this money. I don't think you should cross the picket line. And I think I was trying to get him to talk me into it, but the man said, no, I think you might have something here. Turning point in my life when I realized that my dad actually was kind of behind me. So I did turn the job down, the scab job down. And my dad was right. I think it was August or perhaps September of 1988. I mean, pretty much a day or two after the strike was over, this same executive, I think I called him, but he got my scripts around the lot, around Universal. And I had some offers. I won't bore you with the details. Patty's already given you some of the highlights. But I went to work for Simon & Simon. They liked my Spec Molly Dodd script. As an aside, people often ask me, what kind of speculative script should I write? And I always say, write what you want to write what you're passionate about. I got my first television assignment for this cop show, this detective show that had been on for 8 years, based on a whimsical, really coming-of-age show about a single woman living in New York City. So go figure. Write what you want to write. They liked my Molly Dodd. They invited me to come in and pitch. I did spend quite a while, actually, trying to come up with story ideas for Simon & Simon. Try coming up with something for a series that's been on for 8 years. They've heard everything. So they finally gave me an idea. I wrote it. It worked. And I went to work. I was offered a deal there. Ultimately, I went to work for David Milch and wrote a pilot for him. You might know David. He created Deadwood. He was running Hill Street Blues for a while. I think he has Luck on the air now, which is supposed to be fabulous. Went to work for Beauty and the Beast. I went onto the staff at Major Dad, The Wonder Years, Sisters. When I say I worked on these shows, I was on the staff. And what that means is my life, in fact, much of my adult life, was spent sitting in story rooms. And this really goes to what I'm doing now. It goes to my love and my understanding of story, my sensibility about story, if you will. I would get up in the morning, drive into different kinds of offices, but at the end of the day, all of these offices had one thing in common, which was a story room. It is the coolest place you could possibly imagine. It's just a room. You know, it could be I've worked in condominium rooms, I mean, literally condo complexes, studio lots, little offices above candy shops, all kinds of places. But it's a room with writers, and usually there's a dry erase board on the wall, and you just spend your day brainstorming story. There's a lot of different ways to come at story, and if you want to ask me questions about it, go ahead. I could talk for quite a while about it. But to spend time focusing on story, it was thrilling. So I did this up until about, 93, 94. At that time, I started doing some freelance work. I was doing digital media, some of the precursors of digital programming. I worked at Disney Animation. I developed Brother Bear for Disney. I wrote Tarzan, the Disney film, for quite a while. Again, basically just designing the story. Of course, I wrote the script as well, and I wrote scenes, but much of what I was doing was story work. Around this time, it was around Thanksgiving, 1994, on a Saturday night, I think it was about 9 o'clock, my phone rang, and it was that girl from Atlanta with the big hair and the shoulder pads, and she was calling me. She was in Los Angeles, and because it was a Saturday night at about 9 o'clock, I did not pick up the telephone. I didn't want her to know that I was home alone, and she left a lovely message, and I think I called her back about an hour later, as though I had just come in from a party, and we talked for quite a while. And Elizabeth, I think, will tell you that we fell in love on the telephone that night, which is true to some degree. But nevertheless, I made reservations for what really was our first date, our first proper date, even though we had met 7, 8 years earlier. And in fact, I made reservations at 2 restaurants. One was Chai of Venice, which was a really fine restaurant, if you know it, in Venice and in LA. And the other was the Broadway Deli, where a young man could get in and out of very quickly if the girl wasn't quite what he had remembered from 7 or 8 years earlier. But of course she was. And when she opened the door and I saw Elizabeth, I mean, we not only went to Chai of Venice, but we pretty much, they were mopping under our feet. We closed the restaurant down. And we were married about 2 seconds later. Yes, I brought her a bed, which was, I flipped out. I mean, I'd had enough trying to be coy, and I figured I'm just going to let her know how I feel. So yes, I lashed this bed to the roof of my Jeep. Thank you for that. And in short, got back into television. I worked on a cop show called C-16 FBI, Hyperion Bay for Warner Brothers. I went into Dawson's Creek, where I became a co-executive producer and spent several years, pretty much living in Wilmington, North Carolina, where we were producing the show. I did a Lifetime show called Wild Card. I was a co-executive producer on that series. Around 2001, 2002, I had a development deal with 20th Century Fox. And I was looking for new story ideas, and Elizabeth and I and our 2 young children at this point, I think the girls were babies, just infants basically. we're spending our summers watching fireworks outside of our new home in the Santa Clarita Valley, just north of LA. There was a Magic Mountain theme park, a Six Flags Magic Mountain theme park, and every night at about 9 o'clock in the evening, right at sunset over the desert, they would shoot off fireworks. And it was a wonderful time for us, for our family. I had just such lovely feelings sitting out there with my young girls and Elizabeth looking at these fireworks. And I was thinking, wow, nobody's ever written about fireworks. Where do they come from? 9/11 had just happened, and there was a sense of Americana about the fireworks that I thought were important. So the short of it is I wrote this television pilot. I developed a pilot about a fireworks family. And I pitched it to my agents, and they told me that it was too soft, which is LA speak for not enough sex and violence and car chases. I was doing Dawson's Creek at the time, which had some of those things, and Fox, where I had my deal, had it had some 24 had just come out, and they were looking for those kinds of things. So they wanted me to change it. I held on to that idea, that fireworks family. I loved it too much to turn it into what they wanted me to turn it into. And I wrote something else that fit the mold and was fine. Around 2003, October of 2003, we had huge fires near where we were living. If you guys watched the news at that time, I'm sure you saw them, the Simi Valley fires. Elizabeth and the girls evacuated. I literally had to drive them out of the valley, put them on a plane, and get them out of the valley to escape the fires. It was an emotional time for us. I flew out the next day. We were driving around northern Atlanta, the Crabapple area, Alpharetta, and we were just, Elizabeth and I were speechless at the beauty of this area, the green trees, just how lovely everything was. Nobody cared about the Nielsen ratings. People were much more concerned about NASCAR than the actual, the television ratings, the Nielsen ratings. And Elizabeth said to me, we're moving back here. Elizabeth's from Atlanta as well. I said, I'm a television writer. I can't move back to Atlanta. She said, no, you're not a television writer. You're a writer. Have a little faith in yourself. And she was right. Again, this was a turning point for me. So we put the house on the market in California in 2004. We sold it in about, literally it was a few hours because of what was going on out there at the time. It was a Saturday, actually. We sold it. We quickly bought 4 plane tickets, flew back to Atlanta. I think it was Monday. It was about 48 hours later. It was a whirlwind. We walked into we started looking at houses. I think the day after we flew into Atlanta, the third house we walked into, Elizabeth walked in, looked around. It was in Dunwoody, if you know Atlanta. It was a beautiful home, classic 5x4 with a door, I think they call them. She said, this is it. This is the house. I said, we should look. She said, nope, this is the house. And we were the realtor's dream. This house, we had an offer on it. I flew back to LA. We didn't use the return tickets for Elizabeth and the girls. I worked with the movers, packed up our stuff, flew back. And literally before our stuff arrived, I took my computer out and I started writing. I remember vividly being around these boxes. And what I ultimately wrote was a memoir. It's called $1 Billion Kiss, about my time out there, this remarkable change in the entertainment industry. I always sort of thought of it as if Michael Lewis wrote about the entertainment industry, this is what it would have been. It's kind of like a liar's poker for the entertainment industry. Right before that came out in 2006, I was pitching new ideas to my literary agent, and my new agent in New York at the time, and he said, Jeff, what you really should be doing is fiction. Listen to what you're talking about. Listen to the things that are important to you. Love stories, that's what you should be writing about. It was like a light bulb went off, and I called Elizabeth from the airport, from LaGuardia, and I told her about the meeting, and she said again, yeah, schmuck, that's what you should be writing. Fiction! Have a little faith in yourself. So on the flight coming home, I thought about that fireworks family pilot, and by the time I landed in Atlanta, I had this book, I had this story. Now again, I've spent much of my adult life sitting in story rooms, so it was able to come together. What I then did was I studied fiction carefully, because to understand story is one thing, to understand how to set it into production using language is another. And that has been, over the last few years, and continues to be, this beautiful, remarkable learning experience for me that I can't tell you how much I'm embracing it. So in short, I guess I should look at the watch here. Okay. In short, I wrote Fireworks Over Toccoa when Elizabeth was almost 11 months pregnant, it seems, 10 months pregnant with our third child. I mean, literally just about to give birth. I was finishing it up in, I think it was in '08, in the spring of '08, in our dining room. I was finishing the end of it. She was in the living room knitting. I have these wonderful feelings about this. Put the book on the market. I literally got a phone call from my agent. I mean, I'm not kidding. She gave birth at Northside Hospital. I saw a message on my cell phone just minutes after Eli was born. And I excused myself to go outside and call my agent. He said it's ready. We put it on the market. We sold it overseas first. We had plenty of rejection in this country, Patty, which I can tell you about if you want. We ultimately set it up at St. Martin's in a 2-book deal. Fireworks was embraced by St. Martin's, which was wonderful. And then I wrote The Orchard, which came out last year. And again, this has been a wonderful experience for me. I will just conclude by saying that one of the things, somebody was talking to me last night at the event and was talking about The Orchard. And I was so moved by what she was saying, and moreover, by the fact that she had read my book and was talking to me about this. Dawson's Creek, I wrote lots of Dawson's Creek episodes, and I mean, they continue to be seen by millions of people, probably hundreds of millions of people see my television work. Nobody ever comes up to me and says, that Joey Pacey kiss that you wrote, it's really great. But to have a reader read your work, I don't think I was prepared for there's something intimate about the connection between writing fiction and people that are reading. I don't think I was prepared for that kind of connection, the emotional connection between writer and reader. So that has been truly wonderful for me. Okay, do we have time for questions? Yeah, okay. I will, like Karen, just call on you if you don't have questions. Or Patty can come back up and talk. Yes, ma'am.
You said earlier in your talk to ask questions about coming to the story. So I'm asking you, tell me the various ways to come to the story.
Well, it's been wonderful for me to listen to the other writers so far, Karen and Scott, talk about their process. I mean, I have always been fascinated with the writerly process, where ideas come from. I think we all are. When you write television, perhaps more than any other form, you work under remarkable deadline. The series is going to shoot on Monday morning at 8 a.m. It's a $3 million budget. You're basically making a little mini movie every week. And if you don't have a good story, the actors are going to make something. You have got to come up with a story. So in television, there's a process that you use. I like to say there's a series of principles that we use. And it's based on a lot of different things, what the executive producer's looking for, what kind of show you're writing. It can begin with, I think Scott was talking about this last night, the inspiration for a scene. Characters talking to each other. But in television, there's a dry erase board, first act, second act, third act, fourth act, right? If it's a 4-act show, 1-hour show, you start with an inciting incident. What is the moment in television? Now, you're not inventing characters, right? So in television, what is the moment where I can grab an audience and convince them that they must stay here and not switch to Seinfeld or not switch to a Friends rerun, not switch to something else? This is what they must watch. So you begin there. And I'm doing that with my fiction as well. What can I give you that makes you, if you pick up my book and you're going to read it in the bookstore and you're going to read 3 pages, what can I give you that will compel you so much you're either going to sit down or you're going to take the book home? That's where I begin with story. I think that becomes the book jacket. Robert McKee, for writers in the audience, I recommend Robert McKee's book Story. He talks about the inciting incident. There's lots of different ways of coming at it, but it's that moment. And then we look for building the story. Who are my characters? What are they afraid of? How do I peel away the layers? How do I get to know them? How much of this do you want to know before you start writing? I like to start with an outline. I like to have a sense of my characters. I like to have a general map of an outline, which is solid enough to get me where I'm going, but still vague enough so I can make discovery along the way. But I'm ultimately driving towards something, some kind of inevitable but unexpected climax, right? And then there's moments along the way, I call them tentpole scenes, which are these incredible moments which pit the characters with their biggest fears. So, yes?
Class work at Carnegie Mellon. How, if at all, did that improve you?
The best thing for me about Carnegie Mellon was spending 2 years with writers. It was spending 2 years not having to deal with all the stuff that we deal with now, from car payments to getting the lawn mowed to various obligations that we have. It was just 2 years of being around writers, writing material, and working with actors, getting the material up on its feet. So, that was the best thing about graduate school. Can I tell you that I learned story there? No, I don't think so. I think I learned story sitting in the story rooms. I think I learned a set of principles, what works, what doesn't work. But at Carnegie, the most valuable thing I learned, I think, was working with actors, getting the material up on its feet and being around writers. Frankly, asking the kind of questions we're asking now. Where do your ideas come from? It was having some faith in myself. Again, I heard Scott talk about this last night, knowing that even though you don't know it yet, you're going to know it. And you only do that. I just wanted to add this too, because Karen and Scott are talking about this. Yes, just do it. What Woody Allen says, what is the famous quote? 80% of success is showing up. You just do it. So at Carnegie Mellon, because you're getting graded, you have to just do it.
So personal maturation rather than information what was going on.
I think so. If you're thinking about graduate school, or graduate school for someone in your life perhaps, I think those frankly are the issues. You have to balance what kind of information you're going to get, the value of that, if you will, with how much how much you can get that information from the real world. For me, you still hear me? For me, it was becoming a writer, maturing in that way. But I think professional information can be gleaned out, can be learned out in the working world. Yes, ma'am.
When you're in a story room, if there are multiple writers on a script, are you in there together or are you in there by yourself?
That's a great question. Let me answer it this way. If you work, as I say, below the line in Hollywood, meaning you're a director, you're a grip, you're a camera operator, what you do is very, very specific. You might go from series, a director in television directs a show 1 week and goes on to another show the next week. And what he or she does is very specific. Interestingly, notably, as a writer, every story room is different. The story rooms in Hollywood are driven by, as they say, the showrunner, the executive writing producer. So there's a lot to say about this, but in short, it's your job when you're on a staff is to work for this person. How does this person work? Where do the ideas come from? Is this someone who likes to get there at 7 o'clock in the morning and work until 3? Is this someone who likes to get there at 1 o'clock in the morning? To your point, is this someone who likes to have all the writers in the room and people work together? Or is this someone like on 30-something, I understand those writers would work one-on-one with the executive producers and go off and work individually. So it all varies. Much of my experience, I'll say 70 to 80% of it, has been in a writer's room with 2 or 3 people. And if I were to run a room today, that's what I would do. I think it's nice to have 7 or 8 people or more, and I think if you're doing sitcom, you want that. But for dramatic writing, I think 2 or 3 really core people that you can speak a shorthand with is just about right. Because beyond that, you have 7 or 8 great ideas and you're not getting anywhere. Yes, ma'am.
How is it different writing for a movie with actors than for a digital movie?
When you say digital movie, you mean animation? Well, the best part is that when you're doing animation, they don't want larger trailers, the actors. You're dealing, the actors in animation are storyboard artists. They're great, they're kids that are coming from Cal Art. And they really are the actors. They bring the characters to life. But they're in many ways, they're more malleable than actual actors. The process is similar. It's just, frankly, actors, and more to the point, celebrity actors, understandably worry about their franchise. They worry about how they're presented, their images, and they will tell you that writers don't deal with this, which is fair to a certain degree. But I think when writers understand that actors are concerned about how they come off and can deal with that, can write and produce to that, it makes the process smoother. If you can respect that. I also think respectfully that if actors understand that if they're not always the smartest person or the funniest person in the room, it's not a bad thing. I like to point to Jodie Foster at the end of Silence of the Lambs, who's terrified and vulnerable, but because of that, won the Academy Award. So animation's a lot easier. Yes, ma'am?
When you write a book, is it easier to start the book than to finish it? Because I have read books that I have loved, but the ending was so blah, so nothing. I was very disappointed. Is the ending the hardest part of the book?
No, I don't think it's the hardest part. I mean, my process is to have a very strong sense of where I'm going before I actually start going there. Talk to me in 10 years when I've written more books, and maybe I'll feel differently, but I'm betting I won't. And maybe it's just my wiring or how I've come up through story rooms. I'm not telling you I know how a book's going to end. I don't. I mean, quite honestly, I know how a book could end. I know Aristotle says that endings or climaxes should be unexpected but inevitable. And the inevitable part I understand before I start writing. It's the unexpected part that I challenge myself to shoot for. And quite frankly, I'd like to believe that I'm not going to turn in something, and more to the point, ask people to spend time with my stories until I can find something that's unexpected, until I'm surprised, until I can find a twist or some kind of turn. I mean, I'll get emotional when I get to the endings, because by that point I know my characters, I'm into the story, and I'm seeing things, and I'm turning the story on its head, as they say, and I'm seeing all kinds of surprises. I think a writer should challenge himself to do that. Yes.
Sounds like the end of Dawson's Creek.
I'm sorry?
Sounds like the end of Dawson's Creek.
Yeah, well, that was kicked around a lot. And there were, I mean, gosh, for years we fantasized about the ending of that series. So I'll just stop there. Yes, ma'am?
Was it difficult for you to make the transition of writing with people to move to writing by yourself without having somebody to balance?
There's pros and cons. I miss writing television very much. But I have 3 children now. I'm settled in. We live in East Cobb and Marietta. I teach at Kennesaw State University. We have a really nice, comfortable life. I'm not on a set until, who knows, 3, 4 in the morning. I'm not out of town. I miss writing. I miss the excitement of writing for people. But it's very, very hard to do that kind of work and do anything else in your life. What I love so much about fiction writing, even though I'm not directly interacting with people when I'm doing it, is I get to get it right. And there's something obsessive about my nature, which is another topic entirely, that is really satisfied by that. You get to get language just right, or at least shoot for it. And to what we were talking about a moment ago, you get to get story just right, which in television, because of the speed of it, you don't necessarily do that. And honestly, I mean, I spent a lot of time writing on set, writing to the actors, finding the endings on set. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I'd like to think that you don't publish a book until it's really as good as it can be. I think they're going to throw me off. Okay. Does someone else have a question?
I understand you to say that your first book, Fireworks, was accepted in Europe and printed in Europe before?
What happened with Fireworks, briefly, like I told you, I got this call from my agent on April 4th, 2008, the day my son was born. He said it's ready, and they submitted it, interestingly, in New York. While it was making the rounds in New York, foreign scouts actually got word of it, which is interesting. And we had a bidding war for it in Germany, and it sold first to a major publisher in Germany, and then that helped us set it up the way we wanted to in this country. And I think that's a function, I'm guessing, but I'm thinking that might be a function of the Europeans, especially the Germans, being annoyed at waiting for books to get set up here and then deciding what they were going to pick up. And I also think it was a function of the strength of the euro at that time. But I'm speculating. I asked my agent. He said, I don't know, just take the deal. So. Okay, anything else, guys? Yes?
What advice do you have for getting a play produced or writing for theater?
Well, I love writing for the theater. I think it's very smart. Unlike screenwriting can be very frustrating because you write a script and you submit it and you wait for all these people. You heard Scott talk, perhaps you heard Scott talk last night about Hollywood. What I like about fiction writing and what I really like about writing for the stage is you can do it. So what advice do I have? Well, I mean, depends what you're trying to do, but for starters, get your friends together. Go to a college, go to a high school. I mean, obviously, write a fabulous script first. But assuming you have a fabulous script with a compelling story, one that somebody reads and says, wow, this is something we have to produce, then you gather people together. I mean, for professional productions, you can send to New York, and there's agents and all of that. But I mean, I think the thing to do for the stage is get it produced locally, create interest, and then wait for people to come to you to do more with it. Should we take one more? Or okay. Yes, sir.
What can you tell us about West Wing?
It's a great show. Great show, and Aaron Sorkin is someone who we should support.
Did you work on it?
I did not work on it. Sorkin did. Wells helped develop it. It was a fabulous show. Thank you all very much for having me here. I really, really appreciate it.